Hi, everyone. Am I too loud? I can hold on 1 second. I can hear myself echoing on the computer. Got it. Technology. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome you to I'm going to call it the 2022/2023 HAC Housing Forum. Originally, this was slated for October, and then we realized that we just needed more time to plan the hybrid part of it. This is I should introduce myself. My name is Melissa Sensala. I'm the Policy and Strategic Initiatives Coordinator for Department of Housing Services of Washington County. I've been here for a couple years, so this is my first in-person HAC Housing Forum. The Housing Forum has a long tradition of these gatherings where we get together and we learn from each other and talk about updates, challenges, plans, the future of housing in our county and the work that we're doing. And really, it takes a village, right? We were able to hold a couple of virtual forums in the years where we weren't able to gather, and those are the forums that I was a part of, and was very, very impressed with the way that we were able to come together and really share information with one another. So the bonus is that we've learned from that, and we've learned that we can still take advantage of the online forum, and we have people who are able to join us today who would not be able to be here in person. So I'm very happy with that. With that said, it's our first hybrid forum. So please give us a little grace as we work through this. We already know we have one technical issue because the door to controlling the cameras got locked. So someone is on their way over with a key to unlock that door. So we have about 10 people joining us online today, and then you all here. So again, today's focus is all about partnerships and community and all of the different aspects that it takes to come together to advance housing for low-income and homeless folks in our community, and it really does take all of us. So again, just thank you for being here, whether in person or online. And with that, I will turn it over to Comey to kind of kick us off.
So the microphone is over here. Otherwise, I'll stand in the middle over there. So for the people online, I'm going to stand over here. Well, good morning, everybody. I too want to welcome all of you and show my appreciation for all of you, including our dignitaries and elected officials taking your time to be with us today. I am from a village, so I know it does take a village literally. That's actually a joke. So as housing director, it has been an honor to see our department evolve over the last few years. There have been challenges, yes. There have been some difficult ones and some not so difficult ones along the way. But the last 2 years have clearly shown the resiliency, innovation, and drive of our dedicated team. Many of the housing managers are here with you. Please stand, housing managers. Yeah. We also have Housing Authority Board of Director, Michael here also. Yeah. And my dear friend and colleague, Shannon Wilson. I know the Housing Advisory Committee is intimately familiar with the work and the challenges and the importance of the housing work in this county. There's a housing crisis actually nationwide. And we here in Washington County are doing our part to stem that housing need. So we want to thank our committee members for sharing their expertise and time with us. So at this time, I'd like to acknowledge Alma Flores, HAC Committee Chair. And I'd like Alma to acknowledge the HAC members. Well,
I know, that's true. That's true.
Thanks, Comey. It's been a pleasure working with you in this role, and it's been a pleasure working with the committee. I would love for you all to rise and just sort of greet everyone, introduce yourself in this room, and say a little bit about yourself. Just very quickly, Craig, start us off.
Hi, I'm Karina. I'm a working land use planner and I participate in the Oregon APA, which is our professional association, on their legislative and policy advisory committee. And then of course I am an active community member on housing issues.
Hi, I'm John Epstein, now retired, but over 30 years with Wells Fargo Bank, doing actually almost all of the affordable housing financing across the United States. And a 30+ year resident of Washington County.
Dave Bachman, Cascade Management. Been a real estate property manager and developer for 30 years, almost exclusively affordable housing, about 9,000 units plus working.
I'm Nina. I work at the Portland VA with homeless veterans. Up until recently, I was doing HUD dash for Washington County. I am now doing outreach, mostly based in Multnomah County, but I did grow up here and I still live in Washington County. So this is still my yeah.
I'm Sid Scott, principal of Scott Group Architecture, and have the privilege, I think, of being on the HAC for this is my third term, and I think I'm kind of getting into that. It's been fantastic to see the growth in Washington County and the affordable housing front. And we've been fortunate to be part of some of these projects. So very glad to have been part of it and just going to today's efforts. I'm George Santos.
So as you can see from the subject, oops, oh, there you are. So as you can see, we have such a wonderful group of people who help lead the effort and with Comey on any advice and work that is coming out of the Housing Authority. So thank you all for your service.
Thank you so much, Alma. And we have Sheila Fink online. So many of you know Sheila. Well, so there's so much work to do, and there's a lot of work on the way. And in our time together here, we'll try to capture as much of the work ahead of us as we can. I also wanted to mention that with funding from Metro Housing Bond and Metro Supportive Services Measure, our department has been able to offer new services. Our budget has expanded actually threefold. So that's thank you for all of you for your activism and your vote and your leadership. So I look forward to hearing from Patricia Rojas, who is here today. She's the housing director at Metro, so she'll be speaking during the community partners panel. We are also particularly excited for the opening of our first permanent supportive housing project. This is the former Aloha Inn. Stay tuned for a project name. We are working through community engagement process to come up with a suitable name for that particular project. It's a combination of housing bond for the purchase, the Washington County Housing Production Opportunity Fund dollars, and then supporting housing services measure dollars for the service. So it's going to be very neat. At the same time, we have also used the low-income housing tax credits and private activity bonds to do extensive rehab to many of our developments. We own about 600, Housing Authority of Washington County owns about 650 units. and many of them in serious disrepair, a lot of deferred maintenance. So being gluttons for punishment that we are, we decided to just go big. So we did a $150 million transaction, about 45 to 50 million of that in direct rehab cost to rehab 332 units. The second part is coming up. We got approval from the board last October to get started on that. So stay tuned for more information on our portfolio rehab. This rehab will ensure the longevity of these units, long-term affordability up to 60 more years. So we want to thank the engineers, architects, banks, developers, asset managers, all the village that helped us put this transaction together. Another exciting news for us is last year we earned moving to work designation from HAC. There's a little over 3,300 housing authorities in the nation. About 100 of them moved to work. This is high performing agencies, and we were lucky to be among those. So kudos to the team. So what moving to work does is gives us flexibility to structure many of our programs. Give you a quick example. Annual reviews will become tri-annual reviews. So for seniors on fixed income, there's really no need to be going through all that intensive paperwork year in, year out. Like, we are the government, we are here, you know, you owe our housing to us. And yeah, so now it's every 3 years, you know, less intrusive, but you know, small things like that mean a lot to many of the people we serve. We also administer about 3,000 housing vouchers provided by HAC. We've also supplemented that with about 800 units of what we call RLAR, Regional Long-Term Rental Assistance. This is with Metro dollars, RLAR, yeah. And so we're increasing the number of people we serve. It's exciting, even though, I mean, the need is obviously very big, but we're excited for the part we are able to do. So before I close, I want to highlight one of our programs. It's called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. Many of you are not familiar with this program. This is a program where we match savings for our clients. Depending on budget, it could be 3-to-1 or 5-to-1. In any case, it's a 5-year program, and they plan for their financial stability. And sometimes people have 30,000, 40,000 in their escrow accounts. Where in the past, when you could buy a house for 200,000-300,000, excellent program. It's still an excellent program. And but the 5-year planning goals, we give them career coaching, assist them with resumes and preparation. I think 3 years ago, we gave our laptops to all our clients. We only have 59 people enrolled, so we have a goal to double that number in the coming years. So you'll be hearing a lot about economic and financial stability from Josh Lerner, who will be joining us online. But this is how we pair housing with economic opportunity. So more exciting stuff. So I want to conclude by thanking all our partners, nonprofit partners, for-profit partners, government sector partners, elected officials, obviously county administration, for supporting many of our work and some of our harebrained ideas how to move housing work forward. So thank you all. And at this juncture, I'd like to introduce none other than our chair, Catherine Harrington.
Thank you, Comey. I would like to start by thanking all of you for being here. It really is wonderful to be able to get together in person. And let's not be shy. I was wondering about having each of us go around the room and just make sure everyone has the chance to introduce themselves. So I don't know if you still want to do that or not. I don't. Okay, this is one of at least 3 of my colleagues on the Board of Commissioners are here. Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Nafisa Fani, and Jerry Willey. So Commissioner Jerry Willey. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Commissioner Treese, for encouraging us to introduce ourselves to one another. And why is this important that we get to know one another? Well, I don't know about you, but I've been a little box on a screen for the last couple of years, and I'm more human than just that little box on the screen. But also, I know that you've been doing hard work for us, giving input to the board directly, giving input to our staff, making real community results happen. And so I would just like to have the opportunity to put the face with the name. So let's start with you, Commissioner Treese. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna start here.
Oh,
Okay, hi, I'm Melinda.
hi, Melinda.
I'm a recipient of the housing. I think I'm on a public housing housing.
Great. Thanks for joining.
This is my second term with the HAC committee. I currently work for Project Homeless Connect. And this was for in October. I used to work for Youth Solutions for about 6 years.
Thanks for joining us.
Project Homelessness.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Pam Trace, Commissioner for District 2. Jacqueline Psycho, I am the Senior Assistant County Counsel, and my client is housing and I'm seeing that one. I'm the 54 at housing. I'm working every day.
Steve Roberts, I'm the director of Management for Washington County, and we do a lot of good work together with housing and we're doing work, related work on the housing plan.
So I'm going to pick on the back row.
Good morning, County Administrator. Morning, Mayor, who's still the new Executive Director of the Community Housing Fund of Washington County. Liz Morris, the Resources Program Manager for the Public Housing. And Shannon Wilson, Program Manager for the Office of Community Development.
Mike Silvara, I'm on the housing authority director of my case office, Oregon.
Right now, staff, Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Vaughn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jacob Boyette. I'm the administrator.
See,
Good morning, everyone. I am Jeff Morgan. I'm the city manager for
Al Clark, Director of Housing Development for HCC.
Jerry Willie, Washington County Commissioner District 4. Meet Dickinson, Housing Communications Manager for Washington County.
Hi, Andrew Cranston, Development Manager, Washington County.
Okay, sure. I'm Sid Scott. We'll see what's in the asset manager for the housing.
Commissioner for District 1 and
Surprise.
it's great to have you. Yep.
Thanks for, Portland, PA Outreach Coordinator for Homeless Veterans.
Dave Bachman, CEO of Cascade Management on behalf.
John Espion, HAC.
Trina Ramsey, HAC member.
And I'm Melissa Sampala, Policy and Strategic Initiatives Coordinator.
Who has done a great job of reminding us that it takes a village. So just so the folks in the room know, we have Sheila Fink on Zoom, Megan McKibben, Kathy, I don't know your last, Kathy Nyland, welcome, Brenda Bartlett, Karen J, and Kelvin Valdivinos. Did I get everybody? We have Josh Lerner, There you go. And there's you. Yes. So I didn't want anyone to think that we're strangers here. Anyway, thank you for bearing with me and allowing me to go off script. I know you all have really busy calendars, so I'm grateful that you're joining us. Really appreciate your being here and participating today. Reflecting on last year and embracing the marvelous new year of 2023, I'm struck by the rapid progress that we have made in addressing really challenging, important needs of our community. We will continue to make this great progress together because of your tenacity, your ideas, and your heart for our community. Washington County will continue its commitment. We're forever grateful for the leadership from Metro in being willing to go to the ballot and provide for over $625 million for affordable housing. There we go, 653, as well as the 10 years of supportive housing services funding. 10 years. So our annual investment just in SHS has gone from $5 million a year that our team really scrambled to get to upwards of $75 million a year over the course of the future years. And they've done tremendous work in scaling up our resources, in designing new infrastructure, working with the other two counties to make sure that we're going to meet the community need and the goals that we told the voters we wanted to try and achieve. So some of the highlights for last year alone include helping approximately 1,300 people who've been experiencing homelessness to move into long-term housing. 1,300. Providing 320 year-round temporary and winter shelter beds, helping folks transition. And it's a step forward on their way to long-term stable housing. Opening 117 new affordable apartments in 1 year, thanks to the Affordable Housing Bond Program, with 1,000 additional units, 1,000 right here in Washington County. We will meet that goal of 3,100 across our region. We're well on track for that. Comey mentioned the rental vouchers. We have over 3,800 of those, 3,000 of which are federally funded, as he mentioned. And thanks to the work of staff and many other partners, renovating those over 300 units to extend their life and improve them for livability purposes for the residents for another 60 years. That's quite an accomplishment. Those are a lot of appreciable results, reflecting the collaboration, the innovation, and the hard work of our staff, as well as our cross-jurisdictional implementation with our local government partners and our community partners. Thank you, each, as one example. This work must be intersectional. Housing does not exist in a vacuum, but intersects with many other community needs, particularly healthcare. And we're going to learn a little bit more today around Medicare, having included housing in the agenda. And we'll hear from Mindy Statlander, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, as well as Washington County's own Marnie Kyle. I also want to acknowledge another partnership that makes this work possible, and that's with you, the members of the Housing Advisory Council. It's a fantastic example of partnership in action. It's essential for our policy work. You help our staff members, our subject matter experts, develop policy options out of various ideas. and techniques to improve our community. You bring in the perspective of people with lived experience, our service providers, our development partners, professionals, and government agency partners. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise so that we can address the big, audacious needs of our community. I look forward to learning more from you today and into this big, bold year of 2023. And I will continue to prioritize the important housing work in my role as chair of your Board of Commissioners. I'm really excited to be here with you today, and let's dig in.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. So we are going to transition now to our donor. He is an economist with the State of Oregon's Office of Economic Analysis. And as Jacob works on moving us over to that, can you mute that second echo? My own voice is loud enough without me hearing it twice. Thanks. While he does that, I'm going to read just the first paragraph of Josh's bio, just in case you all didn't see it. Josh develops the quarterly Oregon economic forecast, including outlooks for employment, income, and housing. He also acts as the state's de facto vice economist by forecasting revenues for the Oregon Lottery, Oregon Judicial Department, and state marijuana and tobacco taxes. I have already heard from some of you in the room that you're really excited to hear what Josh has to say, and I just want to say that it's nice to be surrounded by fellow nerds, so thank you. And I wanted to point out that Josh's bio also includes that outside of work, he enjoys spending time with his wife and kids, traveling the state, and consuming Oregon's craft beverages, which I assume means sodas. I assume craft sodas are it's just a brave new world. So thank you, Josh, for being here. Can you hear us, Josh? And can we hear you, probably more importantly?
I can definitely hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Josh. I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thanks for having me. I was looking back. You know, we all last got together in 2017 when we were at the not Beaverton, it was out in Hillsborough Community Center area. And a lot has changed. At that time, you know, we were becoming increasingly worried about housing, right? And it was 2016. I went back and looked. It was 2016. We switched our quarterly forecast report to start including housing affordability as a macroeconomic risk for the entire state of Oregon. Is at that time, after like the early 2010s, that is like, this is a real problem. We have something on our hands that we need to tackle. And since we got together in 2017, everything's just gotten worse, by and large. So that's unfortunate. But I do think there's some clarity now on the scope and size of the problems. There's been some legislation that's been passed. There's been some reports that have been issued. I do think I'm more optimistic moving forward than I have been. But, you know, we're still in the thick of it. And even if things start to get better today, they're going to start getting better today from the worst vantage point we have seen. With that said, you know, I'm here to talk about our economic outlook that we released before Thanksgiving. I have to say up front, 60 days ago, I was much more pessimistic than I am today. I am much more optimistic today from a macroeconomic view of the entire U.S. economy and the Oregon economy than I was back then. What was going on back then, when we built our forecast in October, we released it in November, we had seen zero slowdown in inflation at the U.S. level. Inflation is the only thing that kind of matters at the moment, because it's about the impact on the economy and how the Federal Reserve responds to hot inflation, raising interest rates as fast as they have done since the 1970s. And what would that do to the economy? It's really hard to fine tune the economy by adjusting one short-term interest rate every couple of months. That's what the Federal Reserve does, essentially, is adjust the economy via a short-term interest rate every 2 to 3 months. That's a hard thing to do, to get it just right, to thread that needle. And historically, honestly, we've never done it. We've never seen it where we've seen really high inflation. You raise interest rates just enough to cool the economy, slow inflation, and not have a recession. Typically, you raise interest rates, you raise them too high or too quickly or something like that, and it just saps all the growth out of the economy. We have a recession, whether it's short or mild or deep and long or whatever it is, you have a recession and then you kind of start again and hopefully don't have the hot inflation numbers. We've never seen it work out nicely. And so economists were really pessimistic. What has changed? Well, between the time we built the forecast in October till today, we now have 3 months in a row. October, November, December data are all very low inflation points at the U.S. level and in the Western states as well. It's not just the U.S. thing. It's in the Western states. So we now have 3 months of slow inflation, at target inflation or close enough to at target inflation that economists aren't worried about inflation as much as they were. So that means the probability of the soft landing, the probability that you can land the plane without crashing it, is much higher today than it was back when we did our last forecast. That said, I don't think we're out of the woods. We still have some components of inflation that are hot. We still have a really strong labor market. At a base level, the Federal Reserve is thinking about the strong labor market, the strong employment, the strong wage gains ultimately will drive inflation. Even if we've seen lower inflation in recent months, a lot of that has to do with gas prices coming down. A lot of that has to do with supply chains getting better. They're not being as overloaded. And so the prices of used cars are starting to come down. The prices of washing machines are starting to come down. All those physical goods that we had such a problem with during the pandemic with our supply chains being overloaded, all that's starting to reverse a little bit. Not going to reverse all the way, right? Used car prices went up 50% during the pandemic, and now they're off 10%. That means they're still up 40. I think the official number is 43%. The price of a used car today is still 43% higher than it was, back at the start of 2020. So there's still huge cost issues, but they're no longer ratcheting up. They're starting to lessen a little bit. And so that's helping with the overall inflation outlook. I think that's primarily what we're seeing is goods prices are down, energy prices are down. That's helping consumers' pocketbooks, but the inflation, everything else, going out to eat, going on vacation, legal services, accounting services, haircuts, all that sort of stuff, everything else going on in the economy is still running really hot. So I'm not sure we're out of the woods yet. The risks are still real, but I do feel more optimistic today than I did 60 days ago. If we think about what the impact would be of this really fast increase in interest rates in the last year, again, we shifted our forecast back in the fall that a mild recession would be more likely than not. Not that it's a slam dunk, and again, the data has been encouraging since then, but it's be a mild recession because of the underlying strength in the economy. We kind of just need more of a course correction than a head-on collision to sort of tame inflation. And that's for 3 reasons. One is surveys of businesses and households still say they expect inflation to slow in 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And so if everybody thinks inflation will slow, it's kind of one of those self-fulfilling prophecies where it's like, well, eventually it will slow. And so this high inflation has not been fully embedded or entrenched in the economy. That's really encouraging to see, even if it is just a survey-based measure, which of course, you have to take survey results with a grain of salt. More encouraging would be businesses have had a hard time finding labor. And so they don't want to let go of workers, right? So even if sales slow down, even if we do see a slowdown in the economy as the full brunt of these high interest rates start to impact the economy in 2023, even in that situation, businesses don't want to let go of workers. And if we don't let go of workers, then it's really hard to see a deeper recession, because if everybody still has a job, then we're going to continue to spend money. And household balance sheets, household financial situations are still really strong. They're still much better today than they were at the start of the pandemic. We have accumulated savings, we have increases in wealth, and we have faster wage growth. And so all those things are really supporting the consumer. Even if we have mild levels of job loss, we'll still spend money, being the good Americans that we are. And if we still continue to spend money, we're going to short circuit the negative parts of the cycle, right? Part of a recession is sort of the negative feedback loop of I'm worried about losing my job. I'm going to stop spending money. If I stop spending money because I want to save it in case I lose my job, well, that means less revenue for businesses. If businesses see less revenue, they're going to lay off more workers. And if we lay off more workers, then the spending will decline further because fewer people have income. And you just get into this negative reinforcing cycle. But if we continue to spend money because our finances are better, at least in aggregate, at the macro level, not every single household, there's always neighbors that are struggling, that will short circuit overall some of these cycles. And so we'll think it'll be more mild in nature for those 3 reasons. Inflation expectations look good. Businesses don't want to lay off workers, and household incomes are doing well. So overall, that should be a more mild recession than anticipated, even if this comes to fruition. Quickly, I'll touch on labor. This has been the biggest thing businesses have been talking about in recent years. It's hard to find workers because everybody has a job again today. Oregon employment is higher than it's ever been. Our labor force is higher than it's ever been. Ignore the last couple of months of noisy data, but we're at a historic high for our labor force. And the share of Oregonians of all educational attainment, whether you have a high school diploma or a college degree or whatnot, the actual employment rate, the share of people with a job today is higher than it was pre-pandemic. All of the workers have come back. We're at a record high in that regard. And so the labor shortage is because demand is really high, not because supply is really low. There's not a lot of people sitting on the couch playing video games, not looking for a job today, fewer of them than there used to be. And so the shortage is coming from businesses that are seeing the strong income and the strong consumer spending, and they're trying to chase those profits and market opportunities. They're trying to hire even more workers than they used to because they see the opportunities to expand. Now, it's also structurally tight labor market, not just because the economy is cyclically strong today, but the labor market is structurally tight for demographic reasons. The chart here is just showing you annual retirements. We have the large baby boomer generation has been retiring in recent years. They're going to continue to retire in the decade ahead. And so we have a larger outflow of people who've spent their lifetime working, earned their retirements. I hope they have a financial nest egg and can enjoy some relaxation or traveling to visit the grandkids or whatever it is. I hope that they certainly enjoy that. But it's a drag on the economy because we're losing a lot of workers with a lifetime of experience. And so we're replacing them with younger workers without any experience. And that younger workforce is growing at a slower pace because of Oregon's low birth rate. It's been dropping for 20 years now. And if you do the math on that, if the birth rate started to drop 20 years ago, that would be the people that are just now entering into the labor force today. That's been growing at a slower pace. And then migration trends, I'll talk about in a minute, have been a lot slower. So we have a big outflow of retirements and then slower gains coming in. And so it's going to be hard to find workers for the next decade, at least for structural reasons. The strength in the economy will likely come and go, but the demographics suggest the labor market will be tight for the foreseeable future, if not forever, given our demographic imbalances in Oregon and in the U.S. If we talk about a recession risk, and we think about which industries will be most affected with high interest rates, we think about housing, we think about manufacturing, we think about construction more broadly with natural resources, some of these goods producing industries, and then all the things that go into those supply chains. So transportation and warehousing, and then also physical retail, brick and mortar retail stores. Those are kind of the sectors that are expected to slow down or be hit the hardest in a recession this year if it comes to pass. But I think these industries will see the biggest slowdown this year. Even if there's not an official recession, they'll still see relative slowing because of the higher interest rates. They tend to impact the things that we buy and we put on credit cards, or we take out mortgages, or we take out auto loans, or things like that. Some of that weakness will feed through. And so then if we think about the local industrial structure across all counties in Oregon, which counties have larger shares of their local workforce or local jobs in these industries most affected by high interest rates? That's what you see on this chart here. All 36 counties are listed. It's hard to read, I know, but you can see Washington's there in the upper right-hand corner, kind of standing out. And this just means that historically Washington County is a little more volatile than the state, right? Washington County grows a little bit faster than the state during good times, and then maybe falls a little bit further in the bad times. So Washington's a little more volatile than Oregon. Oregon is definitely more volatile than the U.S. So expect maybe a little local volatility in that respect. And then also Washington is more exposed to these goods producing industries in the transportation and warehousing as well, right? So that would mean if these industries slow more than the economy overall, you could maybe see some local dynamics where the growth is a little bit slower in Washington County than in the typical county statewide. I look at this overall, right? You see which counties are there near the middle of the chart or in the upper right-hand corner. I see Washington, Clackamas, Josephine, Jackson, Deschutes. These are metropolitan areas. And Multnomah is just below the cross there in the middle, the origin of the chart. I guess it's not the origin, but that midpoint. These are metro areas. I'm not worried. I see the chart like this and I'm not concerned. These are our most diversified urban economies and our most diversified rural counties. You see Klamath and Crook and things like that. I'm not concerned about this relative geographic pattern within the state. It just means that Washington County and our urban areas more broadly are more exposed to some of these industries that we normally think is good paying jobs, and they are, but they're more exposed to high interest rates. And so maybe we'll see a relative slowing there as opposed to maybe our less diversified rural economies. This is something to keep in mind. Population growth is the lifeblood of Oregon's economy. It's the reason why we grow faster than the typical state, because it's all about who moves. It's primarily 20 and 30 somethings moving in search of a job or for a job specifically. And so they allow Oregon businesses to grow and expand at a faster rate because we got this influx of young workers coming into economy. It's tremendously beneficial for Oregon. That has slowed and potentially turned negative in 2022 if we look at the Census Bureau estimates. If we look at the Portland state estimates for population growth, we're just seeing small gains, smaller than expected, but still positive slightly. But Census Bureau thinks we lost population in 2022. We shall see. We don't have the census county level numbers, but if we look at the PSU county numbers, Washington County is still positive. The weakness is all about Multnomah, but Portland metro area more broadly, which is true nationwide, is where it's our large metro areas that are lagging the economic recovery. Working from home has been a big impact on large metro areas. And then also the lack of business travel, where corporations really didn't do that in 2021, 2022 even. And so that's really hurt our large urban areas nationwide, and certainly here in Oregon. It's something to really keep an eye on, because again, if we're not going to grow our population as fast as expected, that means our workforce isn't growing as fast as expected. That means our local businesses won't expand as fast as expected. And that all translates into less economic activity and less public revenues as a result, at least relative to expectations. There'll still be growth. It just won't be as fast as anticipated. And it's something we're really concerned about. In some new bit of work I just released this week, if we look under the hood of some of these migration patterns, there's a clear impact of working from home resulting in larger out-migration from high-cost areas nationwide. This is state data in front of you. I'm not going to spend the whole time explaining what the chart shows, but just notice that the dark blue lines have a steeper, tighter relationship than the pre-pandemic light blue dots. And so we're seeing an out-migration of working from home types from high-cost areas. And Oregon is certainly a high-cost area, and our housing affordability is among the worst in the nation. And so that it means housing is a macroeconomic risk to Oregon, and this new landscape of working from home kind of maybe makes us more uniquely susceptible than we thought pre-pandemic. Because if you're not tied to the downtown, if you're not tied to the employment centers in the suburbs or downtown, and you can live remotely, you can choose to live in a nice scenic area with a lot of outdoor opportunities that also cost less money. And so maybe that's something to keep in mind. Our forecast is for more construction in the state. Once we get past this interest rate volatility we've seen here, new housing starts are down right now. I expect them to be down further in 2023 as a result of the affordability crunch. And it's harder to buy a home at a 6 or 7% mortgage than it is at a 3% mortgage. And so this will have an impact on construction, and multifamily starting to slow as well. We now have 2 months of slow multifamily permitting, which also will feed into housing starts. But over the long run, we definitely need to build more housing to help with affordability. How do we do some of that sort of stuff? Well, we have a number of supply constraints in housing nationwide, and certainly here in Oregon. We need to have more buildable lots, whether that's, whether we want to talk about outright UGB expansion or just simply taking the land within the UGB and turning it into a buildable lot in a timely manner. That's a discussion that a lot of people want to have, but it's really about buildable lots and how fast you can get something built, because we have such a shortage and such a need today. That's something we need to do. Land banking helps, infrastructure banking can help. I know there's a lot of policy discussions around that, something to keep in mind. The other one did last fall, looked at some of the construction workforce needs. If we're going to actually build more units in Oregon than we traditionally do to make up for our shortfall, we're going to need more workers. We're going to need about 13,000 more residential construction workers. It's hard to find the workers today in the tight economy. It's going to be hard to find them in the years ahead. The encouraging point would be that the number of young people working construction today is basically at a historic high. It's not that people are shirking working the manual labor. They're all the way back there. It's just we're going to need even more than that if we want to build more units. The other thing I would note is we're going to need a lot more local government workers in planning and building departments statewide as well to approve the plans, to issue the permits and inspect the projects. If we're going to build a higher volume of work, we're going to need at least a few hundred more such types in Washington County and elsewhere throughout the state. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of these needs. I know you guys have reports, all local governments have versions of reports where you're looking at just how many of our neighbors are struggling with housing costs. And in Washington County, 13% of rental households live in poverty, below the federal poverty line. 40% of households spend too much on housing. They might not be in poverty, but they still spend too much relative to their incomes. And then, closer to 50% don't earn a living wage. So we have half of rental households in Washington County are struggling every single day. And so we saw this during the pandemic with the increase in rental assistance. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars like we've never done before at a statewide level. And then survey-based measures of people who are struggling with housing costs didn't get any better. It's because this need is always there, right? This need where half of rental households in Washington County always need help and they don't get it, but they always need that help. That just hasn't gone away. We have this really tough problem in Oregon where our affordability is so bad. And, roughly speaking, only 1 in 4 rental households who qualify for rental assistance get it, right? So that means 75% of folks traditionally don't. And so this need hasn't gone away. It's not going to go away until we help on that construction and affordability site. The last thing I'll note is these numbers you see here, as bad as they are for Washington County, are about 10 percentage points better than they are at the statewide level. And one thing we see is we see some form of residential sorting based upon affordability. I just took the latest census data for 2021, and I looked at neighboring counties, so Washington County to the north, Yamhill County to the south. The relative housing affordability, if we compare local housing costs to local incomes, they look the exact same basically in Washington County as in Yamhill, in Beaverton as in McMinnville. The relative housing costs look the same, but the absolute affordability is much better in McMinnville than it is in Beaverton or Hillsborough, because you can see here, the home prices are 16% lower in Yamhill County, but the incomes are also 16% lower. So that means very few people could move from McMinnville to Beaverton if they wanted to, but a lot of people could move from Beaverton to McMinnville if they wanted to. So the absolute differences in housing affordability matter considerably. And we see some people, push to the fringes, so to speak, because they're unable to live closer in. And so that impact within regional economies is really important. And this is one of the reasons why the state passed House Bill 2003, the Regional Housing Needs Analysis, or the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, the so-called ONA, was passed in 2019. There's been a lot of research along those lines. There's more to come this biennium and legislation currently on the docket to help with equitable distribution of housing and recognizing that, even if the housing high level affordability is the same in Washington and Yamhill counties, when we talk about the needs, the different income levels and different tiers, it could be widely different moving forward as well. And so with that, that's all I had prepared for this morning. Here's my contact information. I'm always happy to chat. Send me an email, give me a call, send me a text. If you're interested in anything you just saw, you can follow along online at our website or our Twitter account, post something about once a week. And I believe there's a couple minutes left for questions. I don't want to get you too far behind on your agenda, and I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. We have about 5 minutes for questions. Does anyone have questions for Josh while we have him? I see a lot of brain processing. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Can Josh hear me?
I'm not sure, but I can repeat it if he can't hear you.
The chart that showed the volatility with all the counties. My question is, why is Gilliam, what makes Gilliam County so different than all the rest?
Josh, did you hear that, or do you want me to repeat it?
I did not hear that.
So Commissioner Treese was asking the chart that you had that showed the volatility across counties. She was wondering what makes Gilliam County so different from all of the rest.
That I don't know. It's in the transportation and warehousing component. So it's a county with 700 jobs. And I don't know what those 700 jobs are. Their largest employer is a dump as a landfill, which shouldn't be categorized in that category. And even if it was, it would not be susceptible to the same trends you'd see in warehousing and trucking. But that's the only thing I have. It's a tiny county, and maybe it's inaccurate data as well.
Thank you. Interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Washington County has a large tech sector employment. Josh, do you want to kind of venture anything about the tech center and what we might be looking at going forward?
Josh, did you hear that question?
Something about tech.
Yeah, something about tech, and I thought about that this morning. I listened to OPB on the way in. The question was, Washington County has a large tech center employment, and wondering if you're willing to venture any opinions or thoughts on kind of the latest in tech.
Yes. So nationally, there have been a lot of headlines about tech, primarily the software type firms, massive layoffs. That's it. That's really the only weak spot we've seen in the economy is big software tech companies with big layoffs, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, whatever, right? Intel's doing some downsizing, but I'm not sure how much will be local versus just their national footprint or global footprint. The thing about tech in Washington County is it's a huge productivity driver, a lot of business investment, new technologies, great resource, huge pillar of Oregon's economy. But up until 18 months ago, high-tech employment in Oregon and Washington County was flat, right? From 2001 through 2018, 2019, basically flat, no growth. But in the last 18 months, we've certainly seen a big increase with thousands of jobs being added in Washington County specifically. And so that growth was unexpected because after 20 years of flat, it was hard to expect such a large gain, but it's certainly welcome. I think with the CHIPS Act money at the federal level, we're definitely seeing more semiconductor investment. So far, it doesn't look like Oregon's got any piece of it from a new fab viewpoint. But if you do the math on the local semiconductor growth in the last 18 months, it's basically equivalent to 2 whole fabs, right? It's up like 4,000 jobs, which is equivalent of 2 whole fabs. So when we talk about the losses or the lack of opportunities that are going to Ohio or Arizona or New York or places like that, it's already like we got 2 of those announcements are already on the books in Oregon and already staffed up. So it's been really encouraging to see that growth. And I think the outlook is relatively bright because of I think the vulnerabilities of not having enough domestic semiconductor manufacturing. I think those have been taken to heart, and we should see the industry do better on American shores than we certainly have in the last 20 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Josh, from an affordability point of view, is the percentage of taxes the same between Washington and Yamhill?
In terms of property taxes?
Yes.
That's the question?
Yes.
I don't know. I assume Yamhill would be a little bit lower. To be honest, I actually use Washington County. When I do affordability metrics for the Portland Metro, instead of trying to create a blended rate across all the counties, I just use the Washington County average rate, which is kind of the same thing. So Washington has very average property taxes, I should say.
Oh, okay. Did I see another hand? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of what we might be thinking about for the population forecast and our ability to increase our housing supply or constraints on that, I'm wondering, it seems like if you just look at things, if we have less population, do we really actually need more housing? But I don't think that's the accurate picture. And so I'm wondering if Josh could help us understand that a little bit more, how that population decline might positively or negatively impact our need for affordable housing.
Yeah, Josh, did you hear that, or do you want me to summarize that one?
That one came through.
Okay.
Thanks. You're right. With the stagnant population, which if you kind of blend the census numbers and the Portland state numbers, it's kind of a stagnant population. A decline in Multnomah no matter what, but a stagnant overall. it kind of means every single unit we produce chips away at that deficit, so to speak, which is encouraging. But that deficit is so large, it's about 7 years of construction, right? So if we saw a stagnant population for 7 years, but we built a normal amount of housing, that's what it would take to get rid of the deficit, or the estimated deficit. So it's a really, really big number. Every single unit counts, but it's going to take a long time to work at it. So I don't know. I don't think the stagnant population is a good thing, but to the extent that it could help chip away at our deficit would be encouraging. What we saw during the pandemic, and certainly 2020 and 2021, is even as the population slowed, we saw a household formation boom, where the number of households increased considerably, even with relatively stagnant population overall. And the big thing there was people dropped roommates. They started living on their own or with fewer roommates. They had the finances to do it. And then, of course, you didn't want to be worried about what your roommate would drag home when we have a deadly contagious virus out there. And now we're starting to see that reversed a little bit in the national numbers. We don't have any local numbers in real time, but we're starting to see household formation decline just a little bit nationally. So people are starting to live with roommates again in greater numbers. And so to the extent that it's a health concern, that'll, that's good that the health situation is better today than it was 2 years ago. But if it's about finances and not being able to afford to live on your own again, that's also a bad indicator. But that would also help with freeing up some units for other folks that maybe could afford to live on their own. So I think all those dynamics are in flux today. But as long as we continue to build at least a normal amount of housing, the situation is not necessarily going to get worse in the next 12 months.
Great. I think I have time for one more. Comey says it's his.
So Josh, one of your slides, you talked about increasing land availability. And, as you know, land is a residual value in economic analysis. So how exactly do you do that? I mean, you're talking about the urban growth boundary, maybe?
Mm-hmm. I think I heard that. I think we have to have that conversation, right? About so I think so here we go. The phrase that everyone seems to agree with is effective land supply, right? We have large parcels within the UGBs that maybe just aren't ever going to get developed, right? The owner just doesn't want to, or whatever, right? Like it's just personal preference. And so and we had the stuff out in Damascus that was part of the UGB expansion 20 years ago, right? And that just never going to get developed. And so there's stuff like that where we tend to argue about the UGB specifically, but what really matters is the effective land supply. And so whatever combination it takes to get at actual buildable lands that can be turned into a unit over the course of 1 to 2 years, as opposed to 3 or 4 or 5 years, is ultimately what people care about. And so I don't know the answers there. You guys have a lot of specific issues in Washington County, and there's the land, the grand bargain from a decade ago, the legislative level, and all sorts of stuff going on that is much more nuanced and detailed than I can tell you about your own land. But whatever it takes to get more units on the ground and get that land, the effective land supply up, is what matters.
And I lied. I'm going to read one more question that came from Sheila Fink on Zoom, because I think it's a great question and I really want to share it. So Sheila says, I'm wondering if you've read Jenny Schutz's, from the Brookings Institute, new book, Fixer Upper, about our housing crisis. She makes the point that there are actually many crises, not one, and that sadly we've created most of them through our own policies, multiple government layers, contradictory directions, not updated. Since overall increases in production won't help if the homes aren't in the right places near jobs or at the right affordable prices, how do you see the state and regional housing needs analyses impacting actual production decisions? And will it? It's kind of a big question, Josh. I'm not sure if you want to tackle it, but I wanted to share it just because I think it's a really great point.
Yeah, so Jenny's great. I have not read her book, but I've read a number of her research over the years. Yeah, I think that's the whole point, right? That question is literally the whole point of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, and then trying to come up with solutions to actually address it, right? Where I think 54% of that shortage of housing, the underproduction of housing, 54% is below 80% AMI, right? At least. And so that will not necessarily be built by the private sector without subsidies of some sort. It's one thing to do an entirely 100% affordable project. We need a lot of those, and that's billions of dollars. But we also need stuff at the 50, 80, 100% AMI level too. What sort of policies and subsidies are best to actually incentivize that type of production? That is kind of the conversation that's been going on in the last year. I don't believe any of it's seen the light of day. I don't know how much of it will see the light of day, but I will let you know there are reports and consultants and contractors and legislators and policymakers that are trying to address that. That's way outside my bailiwick on how to actually do that. But there are those conversations, and let's hope that they reach something that actually works on the ground.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh. That was great.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay, we'll get started. We now do have the cameras unlocked. And so Jacob is working on figuring out how to share that screen. So sorry. But we are excited to move on to our next conversation. We've got Marnie Kyle from Washington County, Josh Kreitz from Washington County, and then Mickey Statlander, is that correct, from HealthShare. So I will let you guys take it away. Is that okay, or do you wanna?
No, it'll be fine.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, thanks.
I'm Marnie Kyle, as I called earlier, I'm one of the assistant county administrators, and I have the pleasure and fortunate to have housing as one of the departments within my portfolio. So it's been just an amazing year of learning the whole language and a lot more detail about the great work of the housing department and the housing authority. Does and travel and leadership that we have in our department. So thank you for my teacher. I'm going to ask Nikki and Josh and Mary to please introduce our panel. And I'm going to start with introduce yourself. A little bit about HealthShare, because some folks might not know HealthShare, and the work that you've been doing and planning to do around homelessness. So HealthShare is one of 17 coordinated care organizations in the state. How many? I know we have plenty of folks on the internet, but how many folks in the room know what CCO is? Oh, good, a bunch of you. So, coordinated care organization, we provide health insurance benefits for people who are on Oregon health plan. HealthShare does that in the Tri-County area, so Washington, Montana, serves a little over 400,000 people. We do that in partnership with Oregon, Legacy, Pacific Foods, OHSU Health, Education, and Private. And we are governed by those organizations and by each of the 3 counties. Lucky enough to have Marnie serving as our board chair. And the vision of HealthShare is to bring together all of those stakeholders that really do drive health for our vulnerable population and bring it back to what each of us has to offer. The CCOs have been around for just about 10 years now. We spent a good part of the early days figuring out how to do stuff better. So how we deliver primary care services, or how we take better care of people who are pregnant and have substance use disorder, really in that medical space. And what we've been called to do by both the Oregon Health Authority and what the community is telling us is to really figure out how to address social determinants of health. And so that's led us into work around housing and homelessness. As part of the last round of CPO contracting, so for about the last 4 years, we've been able to deliver flexible services to members. So if you need a toothbrush and some floss coming out of the dentist's office, that's not something that Medicaid can pay for. We need a hotel stay for a little while coming out of a hospital, that's something that Medicaid can pay for. And so the largest, even though it's flexible services, we can pay for food boxes, move-in supplies, those kinds of things. The vast majority of the funding has sort of find needs on the things that are in and around housing. So it's going to come from over the last couple of years, we've also looked at the combination and intersection between homelessness, high healthcare utilization, and pending product of the corrections system, realizing that all those different social service components of our community are touching the same folks, and often not in a way that is as beneficial as we probably could be had we been working together to provide more support. And then I'll share through our partnerships has had a variety of investments in supportive housing. We had a sort of housing in health to build units in the Multnomah County, and then the African Hunger Project in Washington County is a huge leader of. Thank you all so much for your support. That was housed more than 300 low-income. So lots of experimentation over the last 5-10 years, and a lot more learning to come, and we'll talk about what we see next. I think Marty has more questions.
Great. So Josh, you want to talk a little bit about how the county has aligned and supported and worked with health share as they implemented incorporated housing and health together?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the fundamental things that we wanted to do in Washington County, Marty and I started working together really closely within the first couple of weeks of me being there. We even did a health and housing. It was like a retreat. Like we went all around the country before COVID. So it allowed us to start partnering really, really quickly. And one of the things we guys said, we want to make sure we're partnering with healthcare and that resources we're seeing going, from healthcare industry into housing across the state. We want to make sure we're more resources, right? Because we saw a lot of really amazing projects happening in other parts of the state. And so one of the first things we were partnering on was a Metro 300 project. And that was a really, really cool project. If you haven't heard of it, Metro 300, we want to house 300 homeless seniors throughout the Metro region. And we partnered with HealthShare and Kaiser Permanente, who put about $3.5 million into this project with us. What that allowed us to do, and this, you have to remember, this is before supported housing services measure. Like, that's a lot of money for the healthcare industry to put into housing. That's a tremendous amount of money. And then it allowed us here in Washington County to house over 80, I think we pushed closer to 100 homeless seniors and get them inside. We paid rental assistance. We internally, at the county level, we hired housing navigators. We said, hey, we want to make sure that we're doing better serving communities of color. HealthShare said, go ahead and bring in partner organizations from Instar to do housing navigation. So I like to say we're going to house over 100 people, and then once SHS can transfer them on to either SHS or permanent housing subsidies, so they stay housed. But I think what I also did, it gave us some reps to start getting ready for the supportive housing services measure. We learned a lot. We made mistakes, and we learned a lot about what it was going to take at just a minute scale that all of a sudden go up and now start housing thousands of people. So it was a really, really great partnership. We heard some really great stories. I mean, just, you heard these heartbreaking stories of seniors who are living in their cars, who are losing their housing, going on the street, and this program allows us to stop that and get these folks inside. More recently, we've been working with HealthShare on their pilot. So just, a lot of partnership and learning on how we partner with really complex industry. And our industry is just as complex. How do we partner and ensure that we can integrate these really important things like physical, behavioral, substance use programming with housing and homelessness?
Thank you. That was a great recap of what health share and Washington County has done together in the past, even before this historic Medicaid waiver by CMS. And so it really sets up and in my opinion, as the board chair of health share really contributed and led the way for the state to get that waiver. It was really the work of health share and the contribution of housing program in the metro area that got us here. So Mindy and Josh, can you tell us a little bit about this really exciting new benefit? And I know it's early, but can you just get your crystal ball out and tell us what you think it might look like as we develop this program?
Okay, I'm sorry. That's what any state has to do in order to do something different in their Medicaid program is get a waiver from our federal Medicaid. So that process was what created the CBOs in the first place. And then now we've just renegotiated a bigger extension of that waiver. And so this is the first state in the country that are gonna be able to pay for social determinant health services, so housing, nutrition, and some climate change resilience services as a medical expense. So to us, that means it's the same thing, the same value as going to the doctor's office, which is a huge deal. No other state in the nation has this. We get calls already about other states being jealous that we're positioned to be able to do this, because everyone knows that housing is health and that we can't connect doctors visits and the food that you eat and a safe place to live. So what that's going to look like in practice, we know that health is also a giant, complex, bureaucratic organization, and we can't build a new claims and billing system for rental support. Like, that's not going to help anyone. So for us, as we're looking forward to implementation of this in 2024, the pilot that Marnie alluded to that we're working on now, it's really about where can health best fill in gaps, and how do we partner with our county partners to figure out the long-term support for people. Medicaid has the advantage of being able to be flexible, to move quickly, to just giving us space to do things in not a rigid way, to just say, oh, you need move-in support, or you need accessibility modification to your home. We can do that quickly, but it really is about partnering for long-term permanent supportive housing that's going to make sure this isn't a bridge. The other thing that is really exciting about that is it allows us to pay for services for folks who are at risk of homelessness, not just the chronically long-term population. So if we can provide 2 months of rental assistance for someone who needs to recover coming out of a hospitalization while they're off work, we can step in and do that. And I think that that is a really unique contribution that this can give that we haven't seen quite so much of availability in the communities that we serve.
How is this going to work in parallel or align with the supportive housing?
Yeah, I mean, all I can do is say to be determined and tell you what I think could potentially happen. So one of the things that's interesting about this waiver, and maybe the supportive housing services measure might be like a thing of beauty for the Oregon Health Authority, because it probably takes a little bit of pressure off of the implementation. So if we didn't have the supportive housing services measure, this Medicaid waiver would be the biggest thing that people are talking about in the state of Oregon. For other non-metro areas, if they're not talking about it, it's the biggest thing happening around homelessness. This is bringing a vast new amount of resources that just simply did not exist in ways that did not exist. It's going to be complex to roll out, and they're going to have to set whole different types of systems, I think, to get this money into the community. I think that's where the complexity comes in, but this is a really, really big deal. I pulled it up, but you talked about rental assistance. Medicaid wasn't approving. The CMS was not approving rental assistance when I worked for the Medicaid department in Arizona. That was not a thing. So that's new. That's really cool. Paying for housing navigation. So if you have a member, healthcare world, I'm a member, client, resident. They can pay for an organization to help them find a place to live, and they can pay caseworkers to help them stabilize their housing. Maybe help with, how do I live in this unit? How do I be a good neighbor? How do I, pay my rent on time? All those different types of things. These are all the new things that this waiver is going to allow for. So that's a really, really cool thing. On the actual implementation, breadcrumbs that I have are what we get in Arizona. We didn't have a waiver at the time, although Arizona was also working on a very similar waiver. But we had some state rule and state policies that allowed the Medicaid system to push money into support housing, not rent. And so we were able to work with like behavioral health organizations with strong case management functions, some of the best providers in the state, and they basically built up a permanent supportive housing arm. So what you ended up having was these behavioral health agencies who then became the best permanent supportive housing providers in the state. And we were able to push money out through different codes. It's going to be a little bit easier, I think, here because the waiver is so broad and allows a lot of flexibilities. But what are we doing in Washington County where potentially there could be alignment? Jess and the team on the supportive housing services measure, they built up a network of providers already. So we have over 20 different providers who are doing different forms of either housing navigation, street outreach, stabilization once people get into housing. Those programs have already been built out. We have just dozens of caseworkers or street outreach workers who are doing that, dozens, putting into the hundreds. So we're already funding these activities. We already have organizations who are up and running and doing this. So it seems like a pretty natural space to potentially, figure out how do you flex these new resources. And then if you can integrate that again, even better with behavioral health and physical health services. That's what we don't do. If we contribute to the systems, we partner with the systems, but we do need our friends who work in behavioral health, physical health, help fill in those gaps that we just don't have, in the homeless service provider system.
So again, it's really exciting when I see this. This is now really going to serve our community even better and integrate those resources so that there's capacity across the system and filling in gaps in both systems by working even more closely together. So thanks for the work you do. And now I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. And I'm not sure exactly how much time we have, but somebody will tell us when we're running out of time. I'll start. So if I heard it right, this waiver becomes active in 2024. And I heard the word pilot with 2024. So it sounds like there are some ideas for getting things going. One thing I appreciate about working under the leadership of these three, Marnie, Comey, and Josh, is that you help me push myself to do things to address community needs. So I'm wondering, as elected officials and Housing Advisory Committee members now here in 2023, what is it that we need to start doing so that you can be effective in working with healthcare and Medicaid in order for us to serve more people? Because the need feels so great. And yeah, great program has a lot of providers, but I also understand that we have workforce challenges. It's really tough work. People, navigators, caseworkers, you name it. They're all getting a little tired because it's hard work. How do we build them up, build their well of energy and hope, and keep making more appreciable results?
Maybe you can start with the pilot and then.
Sure. So we are actively in a pilot right now. We started about a year ago. That will run through 2024 when the waiver is up in implementation. And so
all the things that we've done wrong, we've gotten to learn before the federal permission comes in. Making sure that we effectively tailor the outreach and engagement to different communities, like all of those things have been really important learnings. But I think more importantly is figuring out between our teams, and Washington County has been just such a leader in this for us, and we're incredibly grateful for your smarts and partnership. How do we make sure that we're not building this just out of a health perspective? How do we make sure we're contributing to all of the resources that currently exist that you all have built up? And I don't think we're doing that perfectly yet, but we've got ourselves some time to keep learning about how to do that, so we're ready.
I would say educate yourself about the waiver. You don't have to be an expert, but educate yourself about the waiver, what it means, and then keep your ear to kind of the grindstone and ask from staff, like, where's it going? We don't know how this money's being pushed out yet. At least if we do, I haven't heard about it. And so I think as the implementation comes down the pipe, ask for updates, continue to educate yourself. And then I think being responsive and fast. My guess is once the gas gets pushed on this, it's going to get pushed pretty quickly. And that means if our joint departments say, hey, this is how they're going to implement it, we need to staff up and there's resources coming, move fast. Like allow staff to move quick, staff up. If we need to push different types of money and funding into contracts, maybe things that feel a little uncomfortable as far as like what we're paying, the resources to get the people we need, then we have to rethink things. And so I think being flexible and knowledgeable about what's coming is where we need to be.
Others, questions? You mentioned partnerships. So what organizations are you planning to partner with to support them?
Well, again, we don't know exactly how the waiver is going to come down, but in Arizona, we worked with a whole host of amazing organizations, which mostly were behavioral health providers, but then we started working with like different homeless service providers. Well, here in Washington County, we work with, said 20 different organizations, Urkel, Vienna Star, SIPA, I could just go on and on. Urban League works with us, Join. So there's just so many different organizations. This is just a sampling of the organizations that we could potentially work with, right, and push money into. I'll give an example. We're working with the state of Oregon on a program right now. We're still going through program development. But when they push money to us, we don't need to go start something new. What we want to do is take that state money and push it into existing contracts and further build out our organization's capacity to serve. So that's the route we've been taking. I would think that would be a pretty strong option.
I was gonna say first, I'm just really excited. I'm kind of a broken record on the committee because I work in supportive housing for the VA, which is one of the few places that had that set up before a lot of other counties and cities kind of embraced it. And I see it working so well. And the more as I started working with the county and everything, I was constantly thinking I don't know how people do this without supportive housing. It's amazing to me, that the housing authority in Washington County, it's amazing to me that they're so successful without all of that extra support that supportive housing brings. So fantastic for them. And I'm so glad that there's going to be more support. And so I kind of, what our chair was talking about with the workforce, and I don't know how much of input you guys have on it since you're going to be working with other organizations, but it seems like one of the issues with getting this workforce is there's still that idea that there needs to be a social worker in the role, and social workers, we're fabulous and do a great job at it. But I don't think everyone needs a master's to be able to help with housing navigation, or even needs a bachelor's degree in psychology. There's so many jobs, and actually Jess has talked about, I think that county supportive housing is doing a fantastic job already of like utilizing like peer supports and that kind of thing. But yeah, just asking like if that's part of the plan to try and push the gathering a large variety of people that can help those goals.
At least from the Medicaid side, absolutely. It's focused on community health workers. So I think that will be fantastic. And we're really aware that when we all compete for the same kind of staff, that that doesn't serve anyone if healthcare hires all of those out of the county. So we are committed to just paying for that set of services in the places that they exist now to provide more resilience, build up that capability rather than hiring it. We're trying to be really aware of those things as we move into this, knowing that this isn't the lane that healthcare has been in as long as other organizations.
Well, I think Mindy also talked a little bit about community advisory committee, how they might also be engaged in this work or influencing.
Yeah, so we have a steering committee at HealthShare that our board has chartered to help guide this work. It's composed of folks with lived experience in supportive housing environments and caseworkers and housing service providers. And so all of the, like when we build a screening tool or we have a referral process or we're thinking about what kind of staff to pay, what the contracts look like. We've been bringing it back to them to get feedback. They've simplified our initial ideas quite a bit in ways that are for the better. And so look forward to continuing.
Just want to throw in, I really appreciate your question because like, what is it like to be homeless, right? You're sleeping in someone, maybe a neighbor is robbing your tent. You're worried about sexual assault. You're worried about getting food every day. So maybe you're going out, like you have to steal to eat, or you're trying to get from point A to point B. Just really traumatic, violent lifestyles that take place. And how do we expect, somebody with a master's in social work who's never experienced that to be the person to go out and serve them, or myself, or anybody in this room? Homelessness is a very traumatic thing. And so the role of peer supports is just so instrumental. I saw that in Arizona. The best organizations had armies of peer supports who have gone through that trauma, understand what it's like to be homeless, and understand what it takes to get people housed. So one of the most exciting things I think that we're doing in Washington County is we're working with, I like to crowdsource. So Jess, is it WorkSource? Work System that we're working with on a pilot. The initial pilot is going to bring in 30 folks who are formerly homeless, and they will go through a 6-month training program with one of our providers who are doing this work. And then we have 10 organizations who we'll be working with to get those folks into jobs, and get them out. And those will be the best folks to help us get our experiencing street homelessness engaged into the system and housed. So that was a really good question.
Thank you. Other questions?
Jacob,
I think that might be your
Okay. Well, thank you so much to both of our panelists. This has been really fabulous, and more to come on the connection between health and housing and this exciting Medicaid waiver. Thank you.
We're going to take another short break. So let's come back at 11. 11 minutes. If that's not confusing to you.
We'll get started. I know you guys are having like a rousing conversation here, but the whole point is for you to have the conversation with Wade. Yes, absolutely. Okay, welcome back. This is our last panel for the morning. Thank you all again for being here. Just so you know, I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourselves. I've the opportunity to introduce myself and pronounce my name correctly. So our last panel is about partnerships, and we are also joined by Kathy on Zoom, and so Kathy will be participating too. But Josh is facilitating. Thank you very much, Josh. I'll let you go ahead with it.
facilitate by letting everyone introduce themselves. Kathy, why don't we start with you? Because sometimes the people online start going around. Kathy's a great colleague, and I've enjoyed working with her over the last couple of years. So, Kathy, go first.
Thank you, Josh. Can you guys hear me?
Not well
Hold on
enough.
one second. Hey, Jacob.
I did give Jacob permission to like kick me out if I was garbled.
There we go. Yeah. Okay, why don't we try again?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Nyland, and I'm currently one of the assistant city managers in Tigard. And before coming to Tigard, the Portland region, I worked for the city of Seattle for about 10 years, serving in a variety of roles, from chief of staff to a mayor's senior policy advisor on land use and housing, to then becoming a department director for everything involving outreach and engagement. And before calling Seattle home, I lived in the Bay Area. Yes, I am a California native. I always feel as though I need to disclose that. And I mention this because of my roots in San Francisco, Seattle, and now the Portland area. I know about housing constraints, and I understand firsthand the need for affordable housing. I am by no means an expert on housing. I'm throwing that out there, revealing my imposter syndrome. I am, however, one of those people who knows a little bit about a lot of things, a utility player, if you will. So I'm a policy wonk, a nerd, if you will, and I'm happy to be here and share my experience, highlight some accomplishments, and celebrate successes.
Thank you. Natasha.
Hi, everybody. I am Natasha Detweiler-Davy, the Director of Affordable Rental Housing at Oregon Housing and Community Services. And I have been at OHCS for about 15 years. I come to it from previously having worked in housing nonprofit land, and then studied both real estate development and urban regional planning at Portland State. And really have I guess I felt like a magnetic connection to housing throughout all of my career. And so it's unavoidable. I've given up trying to avoid it. And I also consider myself a wonk and a bit of a geek about all of it. And so I am happy to be here and happy to geek out on any housing conversation. Really love the ability and role to be able to do partnerships and really do creative problem solving to be able to serve people in the community.
And for those who don't know, if you want to get any affordable housing development done in the state of Oregon,
I have an amazing team, and we can make it happen.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Patricia Rojas. I use she, her pronouns, Regional Housing Director for Metro. I'm very happy to be here today in person, I think for the first time with most of you. A little bit about my background. I've been at Metro for about, it'll be 2 years in March. I oversee the housing department, which includes the Affordable Housing Bond and Supportive Housing Services Measure. Before my time at Metro, I was the Deputy Director of the Joint Office of Homeless Services for Multnomah County. And then before that, I worked in nonprofit as an executive director of a culturally specific organization serving East County and Multnomah County. Really my passion is social justice, racial justice, housing justice, and it's what drives my work at a professional level, on a personal level. A little bit about myself, like my parents immigrated here in the 70s and I grew up in affordable housing. My dad lives in affordable housing. So this is a very personal topic to me and something that I care very deeply about. I'm glad to be here to share.
Jesse.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for staying for this part of the conversation. My name is Jesse Vanderzanden. I'm the city manager for Forest Grove. I've been there for a little over 7 years, and I've been fortunate to kind of see both of these big measures come online that Metro has, supportive housing, but also the affordable housing bond. And so, you know, I kind of heard about policy wonks and policy geeks. I would say ditto. The difference maybe is I can't remember all of that, so I brought some notes with me. I can talk from, but no, look forward to the conversation. We have seen tremendous change, not only in Washington County, but also in Western Washington County, in both Cornelius and Forest Grove. So look forward to the conversation. Obviously, been working with Josh and Comey over the past 4 to 5 years. Have a great relationship with the county. Really appreciate everything the county has done for the city, and yeah. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, this is such a great panel, right? Because all the work that we do around affordable housing and homelessness, like we're working with our cities, we're working with the state, we're working with the metro region. So it just gives you an idea of the diversity of relationships and partnerships that you have to be able to get this work done. So I'm going to kind of start with the general question. We have a whole list of questions here. I will make sure if I have to stop asking questions, we have time for folks I do. But I'll just ask a general question and we'll work our way around. So partnership in the work of increasing affordable housing and ending or reducing homelessness and increasing services is becoming more important as these are the major issues for all of our community. We saw that the governor's for her second day or first day, she issues executive orders on what are they affordable housing and homelessness. Can you tell us generally, so this is just a very vague general question for you, about the work your city or organization is doing around the issues of affordable housing and homelessness? I'll start with Natasha.
Great. Yeah, so I work for the state, and we are Oregon Housing and Community Services, and we really operate as the state's housing finance agency. All states have housing finance agencies. It's a little bit unique in Oregon that it's part of state government. But the benefit of that is that we are kind of a conduit for federal programs, but also state-specific investments into affordable housing. And so we are the organization that receives the federal low-income housing tax credits, home funding for our balance of state. I think, Washington County is a direct entitlement, but we cover the rest of the state, as well as other state-funded programs. And we have both some kind of recurring document reporting fee type programs that are ongoing, as well as receiving really deliberate investments by the legislature to guide resources forward. And so it really is, in thinking of statewide partnerships, partnering, we fund through developers who do the building in partnership with jurisdictions and other housing authorities, and communities to layer resources and put funds together. The other part about being in state government is that we also have our community services arm, and so we are focused also on housing stabilization, affordable home ownership development, and others. So it's really trying to think about that whole continuum from homelessness through home ownership to stabilize and support Oregonians.
So Metro is our region's regional government. We have a footprint across 3 counties, not all of the area, but generally speaking. And our work in housing and homelessness really is twofold. We receive funds, tax dollars, through 2 initiatives. One is the Affordable Housing Bond, a $650 million bond to pay for affordable housing. I'll provide a little bit more detail about that later, but essentially 3,900 units is the goal. And then the Supportive Housing Services tax, which is 2 taxes actually on highest income earners, and that tax supports services for folks experiencing homelessness, pays for things like placement into permanent housing as the top priority, but also covers critical services for folks to achieve and maintain stable housing, behavior.
Kind of emphasizes to me both the loss of the affordable housing units, but also the really dramatic impact that has to the housing stability of all of the tenants within. And that is not something that we can just dismiss as not to be addressed. And so, we have a lot of different layers of resources of funds that we have available. We have, as you referenced, we have the 4% low-income housing tax credit program. This is a federal program where complicated financing, lots of attorneys involved and layers of partnerships included, but you end up being able to generate a tax credit that brings in private investments. So someone will upfront a bunch of money into a project in order to be able to claim that federal tax credit over a series of 10 years. And so that is a really impactful tool of leverage, because you're able to leverage those federal funds and private equity in to be a pair with our resources. And I think for a long period of time, that was really an undersubscribed resource. And
And then the state came up with a mechanism to created the LIFT program to be able to create some gap subsidy. The state also has, every 2 years, we do legislative requests for resources and have been successful in securing a large amount of preservation resources through however the state decides to finance it, whether it's through lottery-backed bonds or general funds. But that essentially is able to provide some gap subsidy to be able to work with that 4% tax credit to bring projects through. We also have our standalone LIFT program, which is really focused on funding new construction, but has also been that 4% leverage. The benefit of all of those resources that the state and then Metro has put in is that we've been able to maximize the use of that 4% tax credit. So what was once undersubscribed is now oversubscribed. And so it's now a problem solving of trying to figure out what are other paths of making all of these projects that are ready on the ground to move forward. But so I think that's on that development side of resources where we have kind of an array of federal and state funded programs. We also have some tax credits. We have an Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credit, which gets incredibly wonky, but it is, and it lets you essentially your bank reduce your interest rate on your loan. And so it is, in the case of preservation projects, especially when there's rent assistance involved, what that means is you can get cheaper debt on your project. So instead of that loan being 7%, that loan could be 3%, and you can be able to finance that with long-term debt a little bit more effectively. We also have been working to stand up really a broader spectrum of programs and supports. We have a land acquisition program for jurisdictions and others to be able to, I call it kind of our patient capital money. You can, when that property comes for sale, you can purchase it and hold it for a period of time while you're able to do that planning. Because we know that, as you've described, I always think that process of putting a successful project or investment together is really aligning a series of very complicated stars, and from jurisdictions, developers, community participation, funding sources, layers of government, all of those really need to come together in a way where that package can all come together. And we have a lot of access to, we're controller of a lot of resources, but we are not the ones that are the determinant about project success. I think that is up to all of that alignment and that really impactful and critical work that needs to happen at the local level to pull all of those pieces into view. Were there any other key pieces that you think I should speak to?
I'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the upcoming budget cycle.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm going to go to Patricia, whose organization has helped us utilize all of our bond cap with the Metro bond. Like a little wonky conversation is that. So in the last couple of years, Washington County has either started or completed over 1,000 new units of affordable housing development. Can you talk in general about the Affordable Housing Metro bond, its successes, and overall partnership with Washington County in the program? Where would you say we're at? How are we doing?
Y'all are kicking butt. I'll just say that. Y'all are about to run out of money. I'll just say that, and which means a lot of affordable units for people, which is the goal. So congratulations on work well done. And again, I could not emphasize enough the importance of partnership in this, because it would not be possible if it were not for the partnership, the strong relationships, and honestly coming together as a community to build community. So in a nutshell, that's where you're at. Really quickly to speak to the, again, the bond itself, it is a bricks and mortar. It is to bring on more affordable housing. 3,900 units is the goal, with 1,600 as the goal for deeply affordable, and then 1,950 for family size, so 2 and 3 bedroom. And then this is a partnership between with Metro and 7 jurisdictions. So the 3 regional housing authorities plus the cities of Hillsborough, Beaverton, the city of Portland, and Gresham. And then in terms of progress that we're making, we have 511 units that have been completed across the region, 1,673 under construction right now, and 1,060 in pre-construction. So for a total of 3,244 units either completed or underway. So That said, going back to our original goals, we're really pleased to inform the community that we are way moving towards exceeding our goals. So we just adjusted our pipeline forecast. And so what we're now predicting is that we'll probably complete about 4,700 instead of 3,900 units. So we're on track for 4,700, 1,800 at deeply affordable, and 2,200 family units across the region. So again, cannot emphasize enough the importance of leverage, the importance of partnership, because it wasn't just the bond that did this. It was all of the pieces that made that happen. So again, this is about people and communities. And so a few key pieces that drive this: racial equity, opportunity across the region, opportunity for those most in need, and then ensuring the long-term benefits and good use of public dollars, which hopefully in what I share, you'll hear a little bit more of. But in Washington County, again, a lot of success taking place with partnerships of developers, jurisdictions, nonprofits, and private citizens. And so lots to talk about there. Washington County is on its way to opening, or has opened, a combination of opened and is opening 11 new sites across the county. Many in areas that didn't have affordable housing before. All are near amenities, grocery stores, churches, public transportation, all of the things that connect community and build community. And then one of the biggest successes that I've seen is that there are new partnerships and deeper partnerships in Washington County, more culturally specific organizations doing the work, and people informing the work in a way that hasn't been seen before in Washington County. And I'll say there's some really great examples that lead us, I would say leading the region. Give you an example. So there's a Nueva Esperanza, which is in Hillsborough, bringing 150 new units. And Bienestar is the culturally specific partner there, where they engage the community to figure out what is the vision of the community you want to see. What are the amenities, and what do you want to have in this community that you're building? And because of that, I think that there is now new trust that's being reinforced and built, and people feel like they have a place where they belong. And most importantly, that they are a key partner. The people who are part of those communities, the people who are going to live in those units, partner in building the community that they're a part of. Also, and I don't have time to shout out to all of the amazing partners doing this work. So you could go to the Metro website for the Affordable Housing Bond and look at detailed descriptions of each of the 11 projects, but also just all of the work happening across the region. And I'll just say there's a lot of creativity and courage taking place in Washington County. It takes time to open units, to site, to do all of the complicated work and make all of the pieces fall into place to build affordable housing. And in the meantime, we all know there's a crisis happening right now. There are people experiencing homelessness that are struggling to get by. And so one of the creative opportunities that Washington County has seen and is now making a reality is with the ALOA. Here we see Washington County understanding the value of addressing a crisis while thinking long-term and using two critical resources in a creative way to have like a maximum benefit. So while we're looking at, I think, 81 units of affordable housing that will come online, in the meantime, there's bridge housing happening. So offering a place for folks to call home who have been experiencing homelessness in the meantime while these units get built. So I think it's a beautiful example of creativity, of being courageous, because it's not something that I think this community has seen before, and just really wise use of resources. And then, so I'll just say that in terms of the use of the dollars really quickly, they're going a long way. And we have about $1 billion of investments overall, and about 70% of that is from other leverage sources. So that's a big deal, again, because of the partnerships. And so I'll just say lastly, is that we as Metro are also committed to being a good partner, leading into wherever you can to help you achieve your goals and meet the needs of the community. So with our bond interest earnings, we're setting aside money for counties to open up more PSH. And again, bringing the supportive housing services resources together with bond resources to build housing for those most in need, folks who experience chronic homelessness. And so this is a really important opportunity. Lots of success. Congratulations, and we're really excited about the future here and opportunities to come.
I'm going to jump over to our city partners. Jesse, you talked a little bit about this, some of this work that the city of Forest Grove has done to help partner and spur affordable housing development, but I'll kind of dive back in. So both Tigard and Forest Grove have shown to have a high percentage of rent burdened families in your respective jurisdictions. Over the last couple of years, your cities have been proactive in helping spur new affordable housing development and preservation of existing affordable housing. Can you talk about those strategies and successes?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. And one of the great things about these forums is you always learn something new, and I've just learned 2 new things from each of you, so thank you for that. Because we have a lot of affordable housing units in Forest Grove that are over 20 years old, and that, you mentioned, if those goes away, that reduces the inventory, which just makes it all the more difficult, right? And so, and I'm very happy to kind of note that a lot of that affordable housing in the recent years has seen some increased capital investment and has seen some longevity that's been added onto it. So what might have been, a few years of eligibility left has now been extended 20, 30 years. And so adding back into the inventory, it's kind of interesting. I do have to refer to a statistic here, you'll have to pardon me. But Forest Groves, in terms of affordable housing, regulated affordable housing units on a per capita basis, and this information is a couple years old, and so it's changed a little bit. We're either the kind of #1 city or right there #1 with the city of Hillsborough in terms of units per capita. And so Forest Grove has always kind of had, and it's about 23.8 per thousand. So about 23, 24 units per thousand for affordable housing in Forest Grove. I think the Valfrey project probably rose that up a little bit. I don't know what the new number is. That wasn't counting that project. So we're proud of that. And we have good, strong partnerships with our nonprofit providers and with the county, and just very commendable on how those units are being maintained and managed. I think some of the things that we've really tried to do to incentivize affordable housing were some of the things that I mentioned earlier. The nonprofit tax exemption was kind of a big one. That's a long-term sustainable exemption that you get every year. There's no expiration date on it, and so you can figure that into your forecast. The system development charge deferral. I mean, when you go through system development charges, and we try to keep our system development charges, pretty reasonable as we can, because they can get pretty expensive when it comes to especially when it comes to constructing affordable housing. But having that 10-year deferral and or financing mechanism really kind of helps out. We are exploring waivers for SDCs right now for affordable housing. It's a little bit more of a complex discussion. It requires us to kind of update some of our methodology, but we're entertaining that discussion right now. We're also looking at what's called a construction excise tax. That's where you put a tax of maybe up to 1% on new housing, market rate housing, and then you use that money to incentivize affordable housing through some of the options that we've talked about here already. And then I think the last thing that I would mention is every municipality recently went through code changes associated with House Bill 2001. This was legislation that passed at the state level that essentially took all single-family residential zones, now allows kind of duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. When you look at it from an affordable housing perspective, it's not necessarily regulated per se, but it does have an impact on the utilization, or what I think Josh Lerner was calling kind of the effective land supply, right, that you necessarily have within the boundary. And so what we're seeing kind of continually in the city, more so over the past couple of years, is we have seen some units that may be a 10,000 square foot lot with a small single family dwelling that is being converted essentially into 4 units, or in some cases, maybe depending on the size of the lot, even 6 units. And so the supply has kind of started there, right very front edge of that. The supply is starting to go up. So, but with that, I think those are some of the specific things that we've done, Josh, and maybe later I can get into kind of numbers of units and what we've seen with price points. Most of that's not good news, but some of it's a little bit good news. So maybe I'll save that for later, or not save it.
Kathy, Do you want me to, same question as a jurisdictional partner?
Sure. First of all, I apologize. I was getting an unstable Wi-Fi message, so I turned my camera off, and you guys don't need to see my face on that huge screen. So it was just like, oh, here's my pores. So just about Tigard. So we have a population of roughly 56,000 people. As far as homeowners versus renters, it's about a 60 to 40% split. We know that the 30% rule of thumb for rent recommends spending no more than about 1/3 of your monthly income on a rent payment each month. Severe rent burden is households that spend more than 50% of income on rent. And Tigard does have a high percentage of those who are severely rent burdened. Looking at data from the last 3, 4, 5 years, nearly 30% of our households spend more than 50% of their income on rent. We saw an increase in 2020 and 2021, most likely due to the pandemic. But we are working aggressively on those numbers. What have we done to spur new affordable housing development and preservation of existing affordable households? Short answer is we've done a lot. 25 years ago, and I'm still wrapping my brain around the fact that 1996 was more than 25 years ago, Tigard provided a nonprofit affordable housing tax exemption. And in the last several years, we have provided and or created, like Jesse mentioned, the system development charge exemption, AKA SDC exemption for affordable housing. We've created an affordable housing plan. We adopted a 1% construction excise tax to help fund affordable housing programs. We've provided SDC exemptions for attached dwelling units, ADUs, for those that are under 1,000 square feet. We've adopted incentive zoning in our downtown plan district, really focusing on density and height bonuses. And we continue to do this work because it's needed. In the last year, we've launched a middle housing revolving fund, and we are currently exploring and developing options for tenant protections. So it's a lot, and this is not even an exhaustive list. Our efforts are about creating more housing and, like mentioned, preserving existing housing. And it seems to be working. We have significantly more regulated affordable housing today than we did 3 years ago. In 2019, we had about 640 units. And at the end of 2022, we had 864 units with approximately 400 more currently in the pipeline. And this again is a great success, but it's not our success alone. So many fingerprints are on these accomplishments, and it's really echoing the power of partnerships. You know, everything from HUD to Washington County to the state to our local community development finance institutes, Proud Ground, to name just a few. Speaking of Proud Ground, to date, the city has supported 4 Tigard homes being added to their portfolio, and we expect to add another 3 by the end of this fiscal year. And we are actively working to add 3 to 4 more units next fiscal year, of which 2 will be units sold by Washington County. So thank you. And again, this illustrates that power of partnerships. And finally, I'd be remiss to not mention the smart, talented, creative team at Tigard and a very supportive and driven mayor and council. And we are all determined to make Tigard a welcoming place and accessible to all types of people who want to make Tigard their home.
Thanks so much. We'll throw in a round of questions and then we'll open it up for everyone. So Natasha, I promise not to make you say anything you're not allowed to say. There's a lot going on at the state right now. So I will just say in general, I know that OHCS put forth a budget. I know there's a lot of negotiation and stuff going on right now, but maybe you can give us a highlight, whatever you can tell us about what you think is coming up in the next biennium.
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly executive orders change the landscape quite a bit. I was commenting before coming in here that the process of creating a biennial budget in the state is a process of doing a bunch of work over and over and over again as you draft things, and then you get a new governor and you redraft things, and you have executive orders and you redraft things. But our initial agency request budget was, I think, 800 million for the agency. I have the numbers here somewhere. I think, is that right? For about 500 million of that was for affordable housing investments, and the balance for the rest of the agency programs. And so, you know, that for our affordable housing request, that is, over 200 million in resources to do new development, 150 to support preservation investments, and more land acquisition. We are working to launch through a CDFI, a program to help support the co-location of early learning and childcare centers with affordable housing, which is like a match made. It is a great idea and really what a lot of community needs when you have both childcare deserts and an extreme need for affordable housing. You know, and so I think that's our requests that came in, and then we have executive orders where obviously there's a lot of focus and attention on homelessness and housing those experiencing chronic homelessness. And so I think we're likely to see an investment package that kind of beefs up what OHCS had initially put forward, to be able to really create that infrastructure and support communities statewide to house folks and meet the goals of that executive order. And then on the housing production side, there is a tremendous goal here set out to be able to build statewide, kind of in all spectrums of housing, 36,000 units of housing per year for the next 10 years. Which, you know, I think to put in context, I am incredibly proud that we are likely to meet our statewide housing plan goal over 5 years to get 25,000 units in our pipeline. So, and that will essentially equate to 18,000 new units in that pipeline over a 5-year period. And our executive order goal, it will be to do that production in 1 year. And so you know, all of that is to say that, you know, as we think about all of these stars aligning and how this is really going to impact community and really needs, I think beckons to me, you know, with a lot yet to be determined as we go through our legislative session and understanding what kind of investment packages we'll see. But I think in terms of our work in our affordable rental housing space at OHCS, really wanting to focus really on building an infrastructure of support and capacity across the state to work on those partnerships and get the supports in place to do that star aligning, to be able to put all of the pieces together. And so I'm really thankful we do have a capacity building resource that we've had in place. It's some resources in there. We also do have a legislative request in for additional resources to help really support community. And I think it really rely on local partnerships to do the work. And I think certainly would, you know, want to be, you know, brought into conversations, but also in a way to support that work and all of that really local work to make that happen. So I think, you know, I'll say, I wouldn't be surprised if we see additional investment in affordable housing. I think obviously that is a prime focus of work at this point in time, and that the first executive order around homelessness will really be a game changer for prioritizing that work and making sure that we're really getting the most vulnerable households served.
And as we expend on our Metro bond funds, we look at what are the other resources at the state level, right? The lift and preservation funds to allow us to continue to build a pipeline of new affordable housing and preserve what's existing. So
absolutely,
we really have our eyes on what's happening.
Yeah, and trying to, you know, and all of the, like where you referenced, like the cost escalation has been a tremendous impact to housing development. Kind of always, but in the last couple of years, especially like dramatically so. And I think you are both very keenly impacted by that. And I think it is always an interesting balance and conversation, as we know we need to meet these goals, but we also don't want to underfund projects so that they are unable to move forward. And, you know, so that's kind of that balance. And will be a lot, I imagine, will be a lot of focus with legislative conversations as we move through this legislative session.
Tricia, so in your role, you get to oversee the implementation of the SHS measure. I don't have any hair left to lose, but I've grayed my beard nicely the last 2 years working on the program. Can you tell us what you're seeing region-wide and in Washington kind of gives you hope that, you know, we're making the necessary progress?
See, I have many gray hairs that I share with you, my friends, over the last 2 years. I'll say, first of all, there's a lot that gives me hope. What I'm seeing in Washington County and what I'm seeing across the region. I think number one is the level of partnership and collaboration that has never existed before. We have a unique issue of having greater need than we'd ever seen and greater resource than we've ever seen. And with that comes significant opportunity. And so I think that the level of collaboration and regional thinking between the jurisdictions, while at the same time maintaining the uniqueness and responding to the unique needs at the local level, is remarkable. I'm definitely excited about the level of scaling and expansion that I'm seeing across all 3 counties. I'll talk first about kind of what I'm seeing is all 3 counties share this. We're seeing services where they never existed before. We're seeing capacity where it never existed before, and partnerships where it never existed before. And what that means is we are being able to reach people in ways that we've never been able to before. And that gives me a lot of hope. I'm also excited about what gives me hope is the fact that people are leaving homelessness and entering the stability and safety of permanent housing as we speak every day. Overall, I mean, just for the first quarter, I'll say through the first quarter of this year, there have been over 2,200 individuals who have found the safety and stability of housing who were formerly homeless. That is a big deal. That is a lot of trauma that is now beginning to heal. That is a huge impact on their communities, on their families. It is, again, I cannot reiterate enough how much this is a story about people. So that is a remarkable fact in and of itself. Well, probably now over 10,000 individuals are able to say they have housing and avoided the trauma of homelessness altogether because of eviction prevention services that was delivered regionally. And, you know, it's a very powerful thing when you think about what our community would feel like, what things would be like if it weren't for that. Just sobering to think about it for a moment. And so the power of eviction prevention service, the power of these resources and these partnerships to try to do what we can to prevent the trauma of homelessness to begin with. There in Washington County, before SHS, you had 47 year-round beds, or mostly families and youth. Is that right, Jess? And with SHS, you've been able to add 170, or you now have 170 year-round beds. Am I saying that right, Jess? I do. Even better, yes. So there are options, again, now available for folks in Washington County that didn't exist before. And in an environment where rents are continuing to increase, where wages have remained relatively flat, and make no mistake, we are still seeing the effects of this pandemic economically emerge. We might be endemic now, but the pandemic is still having real impacts on our community, and not the least of which is, if we can't, how do I say this? Actually, I'll come back to this idea. I'm going on a tangent. I apologize. And then over 1,000 Washington County residents now have a place to call home, specifically. That is a huge milestone. Congratulations. I want to remind folks, like this program hasn't even been live for 2 years. And we have a goal of, our goals are 10-year goals. And so I know it's hard to, remain grounded when there's so much need out there. But I cannot, one has to only ask and look to see the transformational work that's taking place. And there is so much reason to hope that we are on the right track. And certainly Washington County with your leadership, thank you, Chair Harrington, for being a champion, Jess for being an awesome human being and dedicated staff, the entire team at Washington County partners, et cetera, Comey, your leadership, you know, this should feel very, very hopeful. Lastly, I'll just say, you know, the things that give me the most hope are the stories of the people whose lives are being changed. There are human beings at the center of this, and it's really easy to forget that when we listen to the media, it's just very difficult. And those difficulties are real, no doubt. But it's important for us to remember that at the center of this are human beings. So I hope that we do more to get in front of the root causes, because there are things that this will do and there are things that it won't do. It won't pay living wages. It will improve living wages. So I take that back. We are going to, that is one of our goals. But it isn't controlling the increasing cost of rent. And one of our biggest challenges is hiring people. And I'm sure all of you are aware of that challenge nationally and in other areas. And if people can't, we're not gonna be able to draw people if they can't afford to live here. And so that's gonna be an ongoing challenge. So I just hope that we come together continue as a community to advocate for the solutions to the issues that are causing this to begin with.
I'm gonna end our questions with our friends from Tiger and Forest Grove just on regional homelessness. I know I've had the opportunity to work with both of your cities and both of you personally on different issues, a lot with encampments, especially homeless encampments. And it's such a regional issue. So what are the major issues your community is facing around this topic? What types of interventions has your cities deployed? What types of partnerships have been, well, I'll start with you, Jesse.
Sure. No, I appreciate the question, Josh. And it's as mentioned, it's a challenging issue. And I think fortunately, I want to talk about a little bit about the partnerships first. As you may know, the cities in and of themselves, if you're a non-entitlement city, so if you're under 50,000, we don't receive any kind of direct funding associated with this. And so it makes partnerships all the more important for us. And fortunately, we have a partnership with Washington County. We can just reach out at any time and we can work with them, and it's good. Our city just kind of, we've taken some of, we get what's called solid waste monies from Metro, because we have a solid waste facility in Forest Grove. And we've taken almost all of that money, which is kind of what we consider to be a little bit of our discretionary funds. We don't have a lot, but we have some, and we've created a partnership with two groups. One is the Forest Grove Foundation, and that's basically for outreach, but also we gave them some American Rescue Plan funding as well to start to establish what's called an essential needs hub. An essential needs hub, the vision behind it is not only to connect it with potentially with housing, transitional housing with some form of sheltering, but also to make sure that those wraparound services that are so essential to those types of transitional housing are also there, whether it's addiction recovery, workforce development, mental health, et cetera, that those are also part of that essential kind of recovery mechanism. And so that's one of the partnerships that we've created to try and do that. And then the outreach program really is also kind of a blending of our program with the county's program. And so, you know, there's the outreach portion, there's the housing case management portion, and then eventually the housing. I guess the other thing would be is looking at additional sites to provide additional housing. So the city is going through an inventory of our properties right now to see if we have any kind of excess properties that may be eligible for either transitional housing and or permanent supportive housing of some sorts. And I know, you know, just in working with other municipalities, they're going through those same processes as well, because eventually it's units. You know, eventually we're going to have to, we've all talked about, kind of have more units associated with this, you know, kind of all along the continuum of housing, if you will. So, so those are some things we've done.
Kathy.
Oh, if I was on video, you would see the bags under my eyes and the gray hair. And confessing the PTSD. So homelessness is not a new issue. It might be new to some cities or a new topic in some discussions, but this is an issue decades in the making, decades. And we will not be able to solve it in weeks or months. And I say solve with air quotes. I prefer to say manage or mitigate because solve sets us up for failure, and that's my personal opinion. So when we talk about homelessness in Tigard, I tapped into my previous experience. I tried to prepare our team, and it was a team that we made up on the fly because we don't have a human services department. I tried to prepare our team that this was going to be hard work, but needed work. It would be divisive and at times thankless and often emotional. We would likely to hear that we're doing too much, and others might tell us that we're not doing enough. There is simply no right answer, and what worked today might not work tomorrow. Homelessness is a big issue. It is all-consuming, and as we know, there's never enough time, capacity, or money. And again, no city can do this work alone. And this is why partnerships become even more important and even more valuable, because we are all dealing with this issue. And I will keep saying, talk to each other and learn from each other. We are watching what our neighboring cities are doing, such as Hillsborough and Beaverton with their winter shelters. We work closely with Washington County. Jess, Josh, Marnie, thank you, who have been so responsive and helping and helpful in making connections and exploring shelter options with us, such as site assessments and partnering with them on some of our large encampment cleanups. We're working with Metro on a number of issues, including their trash bag program. We've talked with Bend and toured pallet structures in Vancouver. We are forging relationships with caseworkers and our local service providers like Just Compassion and Family Promise. Plus, we have the League of Oregon Cities and the Oregon Mayors Association creating and advocating for funding packages. And as mentioned here today, our governor recently declared a state of emergency. And those are just some of the partners. Internally, we were working closely with our police department and our library, because our library provides that public space and is often a safe place for those seeking shelter. Public Works is our partner who helps with cleanups and trash collections, and then we have code enforcement. But not everyone can see what we're doing, and we are doing a lot. So we hear from community daily. I think just during this call, I've received about 8 emails. The concerns are usually about visible issues like garbage and encampments. And we hear about behavioral issues, people in crisis and people feeling unsafe. We know to really advance this work around homelessness, we need space, just as Jesse mentioned. We cannot displace people without having a space to offer. And that's what we're really focusing on now. That might be a safe lot or a teeny village. It might be focusing on car camping. And those are the conversations we need to have and decisions we need to make, because doing nothing is simply not an option. And as hard as this issue is, one of the things I've experienced is the hardest part is actually citing a location. People want something to be done until a location is mentioned and they see it on a map. I am here to tell you, you can have successful conversations with community. I say that when I worked in Seattle, I was the face for this issue. I had to go to my own neighborhood and talk about citing a location that is less than a block from my house. And it turned out to be a really great collaboration. And again, it goes back to being open, communicating, and relying on partners, because no one can do this alone.
Well, I want to thank our panel. I know we have a couple minutes for questions, so I'll just kind of open it up to anyone who has any questions.
I had actually wrote down a question about Proud Ground and Habitat. So I was really happy to hear, Kathy, that you mentioned that the city of Tigard is partnering with Proud Ground. I'm a realtor, so I'm wondering, how do people afford to buy a home? Because the middle housing is not hitting that, and so just how to make that available to people. So I'm glad to hear that the city of Tigard is partnering with them.
Thank you. We're glad too.
I can from the state, we also do affordable rental housing, but we do have an affordable home ownership group that is uses some of the same flavors of our development resources through the state's LIFT program. Complicated flavor of money, but it's been able to be deployed to do kind of community land trust type home ownership. And so that our home ownership division operates both that development resource, which Proud Ground and Habitat are strong users of, as well as others are entering into that space. And then we also do have down payment assistance programs, which are through housing centers across the state, as well as a mortgage program, Oregon Bond Residential Loan Program for kind of more favorable rates for lower income borrowers.
Question. So I'm curious to rate all the successes, but on a net basis, you're sort of talking about. So when you go out in the community and you look at people you've placed, which are good numbers, in COVID, we knew those numbers grew when homeless. So net, are more people housed today than they were prior to the pandemic or other things? Or is the number still growing on us? I mean, you know, you're talking about gross numbers, which are great. Who you're putting in these places. When you do the homeless counts, things like that. Are we getting ahead of it? Are we behind the curve? We expect to get ahead of the curve in 3 years because we expect COVID homelessness to drop. I'm just curious where we are net.
Yeah. So that is another hour worth of conversation. I'll just say that I don't have today, but I will say this, that in terms of, are there more people housed now than there were before? Absolutely. Right. So are we housing people at rapid rates? Yes. The question you're asking is, are there more people experiencing homeless today than there was in 2019 when we passed this measure to begin with, right? And the answer to that is yes, too, right? And this is kind of what I was getting at earlier, but if we really want to move the needle, then I use the analogy of the health system. The SHS measure, largely 75% of its funding focuses on crisis, on people who are experiencing chronic homelessness today, right? So that is 75% of the funds. The other 25 is for folks who are newly homeless, and it also does for high risk. That being said, it doesn't control for the inflow, meaning what are the reasons why people are becoming homeless? So pandemic was huge. We see evictions spiking because of the effective moratorium is being removed. So if we don't address the reasons why people are losing their housing, why people can't stay housed, why they can't access housing, then we will continue to be in this boat. Doesn't matter how many people we house. So it's got to be both. We have to be able to invest in the emergency room while building community health, if you will, right? The example of healthcare. We have to focus on keeping people healthy. And in this case, we got to focus on keeping people housed and building enough housing that we can actually say we can do that and believe that we can do that. So it is both. I know it's not a satisfying answer, but that is, from my perspective, the reality.
I think I'll also just if I'm thinking about the governor's executive order around housing production and that 36,000 a year for 10 years, right. In designing what that goal is, that is looking at the 10-year need for housing. So we're absolutely in the hole right now and expect continued population growth over time and increased demand on our housing system. So the idea and the intention there is to say, we need to, yes, there's an emergency about who needs to be housed right this minute, but we need to be including in this emergency response the idea of what we need to have in place 10 years from now so that we're not perpetually in that sinking hole. And I think, and being able to be really successful in prioritizing the most vulnerable right now, critically today, but also creating that long-term infrastructure to be successful. But it is a real balance in terms of how do you make sure that you're also growing economic opportunity and asset building and wealth and and all of these different dynamics together. But that is the intention around that executive order, is looking at that aggregate need that we'll see as we continue into through our emergency response.
So corollary, I think, is what you're saying. That's not right. It seems like if you talk to people who are homeless, we replace them. What kind of year? And 20% say I'm just making this up. I don't know. So you're in a medical emergency, and someone else says I lost my job, and someone else says there's a few. So you start figuring what the percentages are. And then I guess 20% was driven by this, 30% was driven by this, 40% was driven by this. Instead of identifying your service dollars and saying we need to throw 40% of them are driven to homelessness because of debts. Maybe that's where we drive our dollars, because that's our long-term goal to get 40% away from homelessness. I'm just saying, it's really easy for me to say this at a theoretical level, trying to identify what those are. But thinking that's a good story of the community. We identify this is what's driving people, and this is where we're taking our dollars. Versus, you know, and so that's more of a long-term, I think, success story. It's easy for me to say this. I know it's really hard to figure out.
I mean, I think that though it's not just services dollars, I think it's like system response. Right. So what does, you know, for the person who couldn't pay their medical bills and therefore ended up on the streets, how could a different health, like what does the health system needs in that vein? And how do you invest in education and invest like all of these other interconnected systems? It's not creating a house addresses the fact of no home for that person, but it doesn't address all of the other related needs. And I think, and I haven't actually mentioned that we do have a state-funded permanent supportive housing program, which has been incredible to launch, focused on housing those that are chronic homeless with state-funded rent assistance and supportive services resources that will get all tied in hopefully with that Medicaid. So anyway, but we're working through all of that. But I think it is also just really critical to figure out how you do that supported housing component well, because you can't solve the systems at the person level. But so that work needs to be ongoing. But you need your system supports and those tenancy supports to really drive to personal solutions in the meantime, while the rest of the systems figure out how to do that, centering on people.
I think my job as a facilitator is to facilitate the close of the panel. So thank you to everyone so much. Expertise in one space. Melissa?
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you and Kobe to come up here and close us out.
Well, so I think we have learned a lot today. Our theme was partnerships, and we've heard a lot about partnerships today. Thank you all for our wonderful partners. Let's give them a hand. Few things rang loudly for me. Housing is off. That's one of them. We need robust partnerships, emphasis on peer supports, and continue the good work. So I will be totally brief with these closing remarks, but thank you, Jesse. Thank you. It's a good friend with a big checkbook. And Tasha, equally. Yes. So we are very great partners, and we look forward to continuing our partnership and delivering the results. Very proud to be the leaders in implementing both the bond and the SHS. And we hope to continue to make you proud. So I wouldn't end my remarks. I'll be remiss if I don't make a few acknowledgements. Jacob, where is he?
He was waiting for our lunch.
Our lunch. Jacob is wonderful. Melissa, Josh, the housing team, commissioners, Bonnie, thank you all. One quick special acknowledgement, Nina Stafford surprised us, and this is going to be covered in our housing newsletter that's coming out in a week, right, Hamid? Yes. So she surprised us, or she and her connections. But she thought about our clients during the holidays. So at the end of the year, we got a call about almost 29,000, 200 debit cards, around 45 each for our clients, but they needed to be out before the end of the year. So our team, led by Catherine, Jess, we got together, and Jacob too, identified our clients in our shelters. Few of them didn't want to sign some paperwork, but we got all the 200 out, and so few of our clients had a very nice holiday, almost 30,000 in a gift that we weren't expecting. So the HAC members do way more than housing policy. We actually do practical stuff too. So thank Nina, please stand. Thank you all for spending your morning with us, as you heard. It's more work to be done.
We do have a meeting. So let's try to start at 12:20. And we'll meet back in here and we'll have lunch. Thank you all for being here for the forum. Hope you can join us again next year.